Let's get right into it. Number 9. The background noise hack. You are sitting in a stuffy corporate boardroom. A manager is droning on about third-quarter projections, and you are quietly drawing three-dimensional cubes on the margins of your notepad. Your boss probably thinks you're ignoring the meeting entirely, but neurologically speaking, you might be the only one actually listening. We usually assume that paying attention requires sitting perfectly still. The problem is, stillness almost always leads to daydreaming, and daydreaming consumes massive amounts of cognitive energy. It completely drains your brain's executive function. Mindless doodling, on the other hand, acts like mechanical background noise for your nervous system. It requires just enough mental bandwidth to keep your brain's boredom circuits occupied, preventing you from zoning out completely. It is exactly like giving a restless child a coloring book in the back seat so you can actually focus on driving the car. Because it anchors you to the present moment without stealing your auditory processing power, people who doodle while listening to incredibly dull information end up recalling 29% more details than those who just sit and stare. You aren't distracted. You are just keeping your brain's engine idling so it doesn't stall out. Honestly, your boss should make it mandatory. Number 8. The 70 decibel sweet spot. Listen to a bustling downtown coffee shop. The espresso machine is screaming, people are talking, and plates are clinking. You would assume this level of chaos would destroy your focus. But for creative problem solving, this exact environment is scientifically superior to a perfectly silent room. When researchers tested cognitive function across different volume levels, they found a massive flaw in the quiet library myth. Perfect silence makes your brain hyperfixate on minor details, completely blocking abstract thought. Conversely, anything above 85 decibels like loud traffic or a blender destroys your focus entirely. But at exactly 70 decibels, the precise volume of a busy cafe, your brain experiences something called processing disfluency. The moderate background noise makes it slightly harder to process incoming information. To compensate for that tiny bit of acoustic friction, your mind automatically shifts to a higher, more abstract level of processing. It is like walking on a slightly uneven dirt trail instead of a perfectly flat treadmill. The mild resistance forces your system to engage much more dynamically. If you are doing highly detailed, error-intolerant work like coding, silence still wins. But for generating new ideas, the barista isn't distracting you. They are literally powering your lateral thinking. Number 7. The Profanity Painkiller. You are in a dusty garage doing DIY repairs. Your heavy wrench slips, you smash your thumb, and you immediately scream a 4-letter word. Society calls that a lack of self-control. Neurology calls it a highly effective, involuntary painkiller. When people hold their bare hands in freezing ice water, those who drop heavy profanity can tolerate the freezing temperature 33% longer than those repeating a polite word. Swearing during a heavy workout also increases physical power output by up to 8%. Here is why. True profanity isn't processed in the language center of your brain. It bypasses the logic circuits entirely and routes straight to the amygdala, your emotional survival center. Shouting an F-bomb triggers a stress response that spikes your heart rate and releases adrenaline, naturally dulling your pain receptors. It is the biological equivalent of smashing the emergency glass to hit the adrenaline button. There is a catch, though. If you swear constantly in everyday conversation, the emotional weight of the word degrades, and the pain-killing effect vanishes. But used sparingly, cursing is literally a cheat code for your fight-or-flight response. Number 6. The Mastication Engine. Step inside a high-stakes military radar room. Operators are staring at glowing screens for 12 hours straight, and almost every single one of them is chewing a piece of gum. You were probably told to spit it out when you were younger because it was a distraction, but military brass actually encourages it. Why? Because a 10-cent piece of rubber is a proven physiological stimulant. When researchers put people in fMRI scanners, they found that the physical act of chewing triggers massive spikes in brain activity. It increases your heart pressure and sends a 25 to 40% surge of blood directly to your hippocampus, the brain's memory and attention center. Your body assumes a meal is arriving, so it wakes up the nervous system to process the incoming calories. It is the biological equivalent of revving an engine in neutral. As a result, chewing gum drops reaction times by 10% and pushes your sustained attention to its absolute peak. You aren't just chewing a treat, you are operating a manual pump for your cerebral cortex. There is just one catch. Because your brain eventually realizes no actual food is coming, the cognitive overclock completely shuts down after exactly 20 minutes. Number 5. The external RAM protocol. Imagine a high-pressure job interview or a tense police interrogation. The person answering questions is talking, and their hands are flying everywhere. A body language expert will say they are leaking nervousness. A neuroscientist will say they are performing high-level cognitive offloading. We are always taught that keeping our hands neatly folded makes us look smart and composed, but restraining your hands actively makes you stupider in the moment. In a classic University of Chicago study, researchers asked people to solve complex math problems while simultaneously memorizing a list of letters. Half the group had their hands restrained, while the other half could gesture freely. The people allowed to wave their hands around remembered significantly more letters and solved the math much faster. Your brain's working memory has a strictly limited capacity. When you gesture, you are taking abstract conceptual information and temporarily storing it in the physical movement of your hands. It is exactly like writing down a phone number instead of trying to repeat it in your head. Assuming you are explaining a complex idea, you aren't just talking with your hands. You are using the empty air around you as an external hard drive. Number 4. The nervous system engine. Walk into any quiet library, and you'll probably spot someone aggressively bouncing their leg under the table. Most people assume they lack discipline or have entirely too much energy. In reality, they are bouncing their leg because their brain is literally falling asleep. Schools demand total stillness for learning. But for a chronically understimulated mind, especially one leaning toward ADHD, sitting perfectly still is basically sensory deprivation. Your prefrontal cortex requires a specific cocktail of dopamine and norepinephrine to maintain focus. When a task is too boring, the brain is starved of these crucial chemicals, and executive function plummets. That is where the physical movement comes in. Fidgeting provides sensory and motor feedback that stimulates the central nervous system. It raises the brain's overall arousal level back up to the baseline required to actually do the work. It is exactly like shaking a dying flashlight to force the battery to connect. While it can be a distraction for a fully stimulated neurotypical brain, for many, it is subconscious self-medication. Bouncing your leg isn't a lack of focus. It is your body manually jump-starting your prefrontal cortex. Number 3. The artificial morning. You are standing on a packed commuter subway train at 6 in the morning, exhausted, staring blankly at your glowing phone screen. Wellness gurus constantly treat that blue light like toxic radiation that is ruining your brain. But at this specific time of day, that screen is actually doing more for your cognitive function than a double espresso. When researchers pitted short-wavelength blue light directly against 240 milligrams of caffeine, roughly 2 cups of coffee, the light exposure actually outperformed the caffeine in tests of sustained attention. The secret lies in a specialized set of cells in your eyes called melanopsin receptors. These cells do not process vision at all. They are designed solely to detect blue light and send a signal straight to your brain's master clock, violently halting your sleep chemistry and waking up your nervous system. It is the biological equivalent of ripping the blinds open instead of trying to wake up in a pitch-black cave. Obviously, scrolling at midnight will still destroy your sleep cycle, but early in the day, your phone isn't a sleep killer. You are just taking the right medicine at the wrong time. Number 2. The trauma blocking block. Picture a chaotic hospital ER. A patient just survived a terrifying car crash. Instead of a sedative, the doctor hands them a console and tells them to play Tetris. It looks like a shallow distraction, but it is a time-sensitive neurological intervention. It takes human memory about 6 hours to fully consolidate a trauma into long-term storage. Because flashbacks are highly visual, the brain spends that window trying to render the traumatic memory into a video. But your visual processing center has limited bandwidth. Playing Tetris within hours of a crisis creates a cognitive blockade. It forces the brain to render falling blocks instead, maxing out the processor so the trauma video fails to save properly. This results in 62% fewer intrusive flashbacks in the following weeks. It is like trying to download a massive file while streaming a 4K movie on the same Wi-Fi. The download simply fails. While it doesn't wipe the memory of the event itself, playing a visual puzzle right after a crisis creates severe interference. You aren't just clearing digital lines, you are actively scrambling the writing process of your darkest memories. Number 1. The 2-6-minute orbit. Look inside a commercial airliner over the Pacific. The captain closes their eyes and goes to sleep. On the ground, sleeping on the job gets you fired. In the sky, it's a calculated FAA-approved neurological reset designed by NASA. Testing pilots on long flights, NASA found that a timed nap produced a 54% boost in alertness and a 34% increase in performance. NASA doesn't view napping as lazy, they view it as mandatory cognitive maintenance, but timing is everything. All day, your brain builds up adenosine, a chemical that causes fatigue. A nap acts as a flush valve. 26 minutes is the exact sweet spot to safely clear that adenosine without dropping your brain into deep sleep. Sleep past 30 minutes, and you wake up stupider, a dangerous cognitive lag called sleep inertia. It's like restarting your phone to clear the RAM, but ripping the battery out halfway through an update. Hit exactly 26 minutes, however, and you successfully reboot your brain's operating system. You aren't lazy, you are just following aerospace protocol.